You are going to be creating an animated unicycle, and it's very similar to this push pin example. So you're going to have a unicycle instead of a push pin, but you can rotate it right, left, and you can stop the rotation. So if you turn it to the right, you can kind of see how it works. And we can switch it to the left, and we can stop it. So you're going to basically be doing the same thing with a series of unicycle images. And we're going to take a little look at the code. This is all of the code that is required to animate the push pin. And you'll be doing something similar with Unicycle. You'll download the zipped folder and decompress it. And then you'll see there's a series of images. In fact, I'll go ahead and do this. Yeah, let me see. I'm going to do my lesson 4 folder. And I'm going to end up extracting it, but I'll just throw the zipped one in here too. And let me pull this over here. So right now it's zipped, and I do need to extract. And it's going to put it under lesson 4, which is fine, in a unicycle folder, which is also fine. And I'm going to open that up. And you can see there are actually 16 graphics. First one starts numbering at 0 to 15, so that gives us a total of 16. And then there's also a web page that you're going to be editing here. And what you're going to end up with is very similar to pushpin. The code is going to be similar, but obviously you're dealing with a unicycle instead of a pin. So you'll have some kind of a variable. I called this one rotate pin. You might want to call it, rotate uni or rotate unicycle. And it's basically going to store the direction that the unicycle is rotating. Is it rotating to the left or is it rotating to the right? Then you're going to create an array, and you might want to call it, uni images, whatever you want to call it. The size of the array is going to be different than this because we had 16 graphics, and for the push pin we only have 10. Okay, so it's going to be a little different size. You also have to have a variable where you are storing which graphic is the current graphic. So in Unicycle, we got 16, and which one of these is the current one? Because if you're going to be rotating to the right or left, you need to know where you're at in this array. Okay, so I would probably call that current uni. You guys can call it what you want. Then at this point, we have variables defined, and we need to populate our array. And so this is going to be a unicycle array. And we can do a for loop. And again, this is checking to see that x is less than 10. X is going to be our subscript. You have 16 in your array. And then we're basically just going to fill up the array. And for the push pin, the names of the graphics begin with pin followed by a number, and they end in GIF. And that's why we can use a little loop to populate the array, because first x is 0, so it's going to basically say pin 0.gif. It'll pop that in at position 0. Then it'll say pin 1.gif, pop that in position 1. And if you look, you'll notice Unicycle has a similar naming convention. Okay, so these all start with unicycle followed by a number, 0 through 16 or 15, and they all end in GIF. So instead of saying pin here, you're going to say unicycle all lowercase, and then you'll have unicycle0.gif, unicycle1.gif, etc. as you're filling up your array. And then we have a couple different, we have a function that goes to the right, and down here we have a function that goes to the left. And if the right function is called, okay, so you kind of have to envision, for the push pin, we have graphics 0 through 9, because that makes 10 of them. So if we are at position 9, we are at the far end. So for unicycle, we have graphics in position 0 through 15. So if we're here on 15, we're at the end, and we need to start over at 0. Okay, and that is what this is doing. It's just saying if you're at the end of the array, you need to go back to the beginning. If you're not at the end of the array, then go ahead and add 1 to the current pin or the current unicycle. So if we were anywhere else besides the end, let's say we're here, it's going to add 1, and this is going to become the current image. Okay. And this is all for rotating to the right. Once we figure out what that next image is going to be in our sequence, then we are going to update the image collection, the very first image in our page, okay, with that location in the array. So what does this connect to? This connects to the very first image tag. We are using the images collection. The very first image tag is at subscript 0. In fact, it's the only image tag, but it automatically creates these collections. Okay, so this is, images sub 0. So that is the container that we are updating. Now you'll notice it doesn't have an ID. So we couldn't say, get element by ID to update it, which is why we used a collection instead. You'll notice left is kind of similar. So with left, instead of going this direction, right, we're going this direction. So if we're at 0, what happens is we got to go back to the end because we're moving left. Okay, so here, if we're at 0, then we want to go to unicycle 15. Okay, so this for your unicycle, if you're calling it current uni, if the current uni is 0, then you're going to set it to 15 because you need to go to the end. Okay, otherwise, if you're not at 0, okay, let's say we're here, we can subtract 1 and we're fine. And that's what it does. And again, it is using the image collection and it's updating that with the current location in the array. So we've talked about everything except for the start function. And so the start function is kind of important because when they click on the right button or they click on the left button, that is the function that gets called. So if they click on the right button, we're calling the start function with the letter R. And if they click on the left button, we are calling the start function with the letter L. Okay, so if they click on right or left, we go through this function. And that letter, R or L, is assigned a name of direction. So the first thing that we're checking here is to see if they are currently rotating. Okay? And if they're currently rotating, then rotate pin is not going to equal null, okay? Because they're currently either going right or left. So if they're currently rotating, we're just going to clear out the interval. So we're basically, it's kind of like erasing, okay? So we're erasing the direction that they're currently going. Then if they chose, or if they clicked on right, we check to see if direction is equal to R, and if it is, then we assign set interval right to rotate pin. Otherwise, if it's not R, we know it's L, and we do set interval left. So what set interval does is it's going to call the function at this time interval, and I believe it's milliseconds. So in an animation like this, you want a pretty small number because you want a smooth animation. If you make this number really big, it's going to look more jerky. Okay, so this sets the interval, and basically it keeps calling this function until you click a different button. Okay, so this is how right and left get called. And then down here, the only thing we haven't talked about is the stop button. So if they click on stop, we just call clear interval. And basically that stops this calling of right or left. Okay, so it's kind of erasing whatever direction they're going in. So clear interval kind of works with set interval. Set interval will call a function over and over and over again, unlimited number of times at the interval of time you set. Clear interval stops the function call. So you are going to be doing something almost identical to this for the unicycle. Okay, so if you do run into any problems, let me know. And hopefully you guys will have fun with this because it is kind of fun playing around with the animation.